Hello there, and welcome to Scroll to Sleep. If you've been scrolling all day and just need a moment to wind down, you're in the right place. We're here with some more stories from Reddit to help you drift off. If you enjoy relaxing to these videos, be sure to hit like and subscribe. Now, dim your screen, get comfortable, and let's get straight to tonight's stories.
Story 1.
I know how this sounds. I'm the wife who cheated. The one who blew up a perfectly good marriage. I'm the villain in this story, and my husband is the hero who somehow found it in himself to stay. I get it. I've told myself that story 1,000 times. But the truth is, the marriage wasn't perfectly good. And I wasn't just looking for a thrill. I was suffocating, and I did a terrible thing to try and get some air. My husband and I got married in 2005. On paper, we had it all. Good jobs, a nice house, a stable life. He is a good man. He's kind, he's steady, and he always supported me. But our foundation was built on things we never ever talked about. I was raised in a very strict, high-control church. My entire life I was taught that my value was tied to my purity. My body wasn't mine. It was something to be guarded, covered up, and saved for my future husband. It was a potential source of temptation for men, a problem to be managed. When I married my husband, I gave him my virginity. It felt like handing over the most valuable thing I owned, the one thing my entire upbringing told me was priceless. For over a decade, I played the part of the good Christian wife. I did everything I was supposed to do. But around 2016, things started to fall apart for me. The church got heavily into politics in a way that made my stomach turn. I started seeing the whole purity culture for what it was, a cage. It wasn't about being holy. It was about shame and control. At the same time, we still didn't have kids. Every month without a pregnancy felt like a personal failure, like God Himself was telling me I wasn't good enough. My husband never said a word, he never pressured me, but that didn't matter. I carried the shame of it deep in my gut. We loved each other, but we were like two people living in the same house who didn't really speak the same language. We were both raised by parents who weren't big on feelings, so we just repeated that. We never talked about the hard stuff, the messy stuff. He would shut down or avoid conflict, and I was just falling apart inside. I was burning out at my job. I was grieving a close friend who had died. And I was shedding this religious identity that had been my whole world. I had nothing to replace it with, and no one to talk to. I've never felt so completely alone while sleeping next to someone every night. The breaking point was a funeral in 2019. I was sitting there looking at the casket, and this wave of pure terror washed over me. I realized I hadn't actually lived my life. I had just followed a set of rules. And then I met him. It wasn't some movie moment. He wasn't a temptation I had to fight. He was just a conversation. We started talking, and for the first time in forever, I felt like someone was actually listening. When I told him about my doubts with the church, my burnout, the shame, I felt he didn't try to fix me. He didn't give me advice. He just listened and looked at me like he understood. Like he saw, times me times, not the perfect wife I was pretending to be. Asking for his number didn't feel like I was crossing a line. It felt like I was grabbing a life raft. The texting started soon after. It was just friendly stuff. We talked about books, music, our jobs. It was my secret little space where I could be myself. When my husband found me smiling at my phone and asked if something was going on between me and this new friend, I said no. And in my head, it wasn't even a lie. It wasn't about sex. It was about having a connection. It was my emotional oxygen, and I wasn't going to give it up. He asked me a second time, a few weeks later, more suspicious, and I denied it again more firmly. I was protecting the one thing that felt like it was mine. Then my husband had to leave for a 5-week work trip. The first few days were fine, but then the silence of the house started to get to me. It was so loud. It felt like the perfect symbol for the emptiness I had inside. Inviting him over was a stupid, reckless decision born out of pure desperation. I told myself we were just going to hang out as friends, watch a movie. We started drinking. He drank a lot more than I did, and he started talking about all the broken parts of his own life. I saw my own loneliness reflected in him. When it got late, I told him he shouldn't drive. He could crash on the couch. It was a series of tiny, awful choices. Each one felt logical at the time, but they were all leading to the same place. The truth is, I just didn't want to be alone in that silent house again. The line between him sleeping on the couch and him sleeping in the spare bedroom got blurry. Then the line between the spare bedroom and my bedroom disappeared completely. It happened in my marital home, in the bed I shared with my husband. And it wasn't some passionate romantic scene. It was a rebellion. It was me taking back a body I'd been taught my whole life to be ashamed of. It was a clumsy, messy, destructive act to feel something anything other than numb. In that moment, he didn't ask me to be anything other than what I was. He didn't judge me. He just accepted the broken person in front of him, and it felt like breathing after being held underwater. The fantasy didn't last long. For a few months, I lived a double life. The guilt was eating me alive, but the validation was like a drug. Then he dropped the bomb. He gave me an ultimatum. I can't do this anymore, he said. You need to leave your husband, or I'm walking away. Just like that, the illusion shattered. He wasn't my savior. He wasn't a lifeline. He was just another person with another set of rules I had to follow. He was another cage. I was trapped. My husband offered me a stable life, a future, but a future where I felt invisible. This other man offered me a fleeting feeling of being seen, but he offered no future at all. I stood there in my kitchen, phone in my hand, and realized I had set my entire life on fire. And now I was about to be left with nothing but the ashes. The depression that followed was a physical thing. It felt like a heavy blanket I couldn't throw off, making it hard to breathe, hard to move. I was crying all the time, hiding in the bathroom at work, sobbing in my car. I was about to lose everything. The man who offered a temporary escape had shown me he was just another dead end. The man who offered a real future, a whole life we had built together, had no idea who I really was. I had to choose, but there was no good choice. There was only losing him or losing my husband. I told the other man I couldn't leave my husband. He was gone just like he promised. The brief feeling of being seen vanished, and I was left with the horrible, crushing weight of what I had done. Before I could bring myself to confess, I tried to fix it. I tried to undo everything by being the perfect wife. I started dressing up in the clothes I knew my husband liked. I went out and helped him in the yard, something I never did. I started going to the gym with him every morning. I was desperately trying to be the woman I should have been all along, hoping that if I acted the part well enough, the reality of the last 4 months would just disappear. But it was like trying to patch a sinking ship with tape. Every time he smiled at me, clueless and kind, it felt like a knife twisting in my gut. I was a ghost in my own home, and the guilt was eating me alive. I knew I had to tell him. I couldn't live with a secret anymore. I'd already started going to a therapist on my own a few weeks earlier, trying to figure out why I would blow up my own life. It was through talking to her that I realized I couldn't start to heal anything until the truth was out. Confessing was the single most terrifying thing I have ever done. We were sitting on the couch, the same couch where I had sat with the other man. I just started talking, and the words tumbled out ugly and clumsy. I told him everything. I saw the exact moment the words registered. His face just collapsed. The man I knew, the steady, unshakable man I had loved for 15 years, just broke right in front of me, and I was the one holding the hammer. His pain was like nothing I'd ever seen. It wasn't just anger. It was a deep, soul-crushing agony. It was a fire, and it burned down everything we had ever built. The questions came one after another. Where? When? How many times in our bed? Each answer was another blow. He got up and started pacing, looking at our home like it was a stranger's house. He couldn't stay. He packed a bag, and before he left, I asked him to promise me he wouldn't do anything to hurt himself. He just looked at me with dead eyes and said, "I can't promise you that." Then he walked out the door. Those 4 days he was gone were the longest of my life. The silent house wasn't just empty anymore. It was full of his pain. I didn't know if he was alive or dead. I didn't eat. I didn't sleep. I just sat with the destruction I had caused. I dove into books about betrayal, about trauma, anything I could find that might help me understand the damage I'd inflicted. I was trying to find a language for his pain because I knew if he ever came back, I'm sorry, wouldn't be nearly enough. He finally came home. He looked like a shell of himself. He told me he couldn't promise we would make it, but he was willing to try. He said the old marriage was over. I had killed it. If we were going to move forward, we would have to start from scratch, like two strangers. He wanted us to go on dates. He wanted us to go to counseling together. It was more than I deserved. It was a gift of grace I never expected. Therapy was brutal. For the first time in our entire relationship, we actually talked. Not about work or bills or what to have for dinner. We talked about our childhoods, our fears, the reasons we were both so emotionally closed off. We uncovered all the layers of silence and polite distance that had defined our marriage. I learned about the loneliness he felt, and he learned about the suffocation I felt. We were two people who had slept side by side for years, but had never truly let the other person in. My affair was the crisis that forced the door open. It took months. There were days he couldn't even look at me. There were nights we both just cried. But slowly, painfully, we started to build something new on the rubble of our old life. We were honest in a way we had never been before. Brutally, radically honest. We talked about everything, no matter how uncomfortable. About 7 months after my confession, we were talking about the future. We knew we couldn't go back to the way things were. The silence and the secrets were what broke us. That's when the idea of polyamory came up. At first it sounded crazy. But the more we talked about it, the more it made a strange kind of sense for us. It wasn't an excuse to sleep around. It was the opposite. It was a commitment to tear down every wall. It was a promise to never, ever have a secret again. It meant all connections, all feelings, all attractions had to be on the table, discussed openly, and with consent from everyone involved. It's our new foundation. It's a promise of complete and total transparency. It's our way of making sure that shame and secrets can never grow in the dark again. I know people won't understand it. They'll see it as a broken marriage, a weird arrangement, or me just getting what I wanted all along. But they don't see the long, hard nights of talking, the therapy sessions, the work we have put in to understand each other. Our old marriage is dead. I killed it. But the one we have now, the one built on radical honesty and a refusal to hide from the truth, is more real and more intimate than anything we had before. I broke him, and I broke us. But from the ashes, we decided to build something together that could never be burned down in the same way again. Story 2. My husband thinks I don't see the way he looks at me anymore. He's wrong. I see everything. I see the way his eyes skim over me instead of settling. I see the quick, tight smile he gives me when I get dressed. A smile that says, "Good effort," instead of, "You're beautiful." Most of all, I see the way he looks at his sister and then back at me. It's in that split-second comparison that I feel myself disappear. We had our babies around the same time. Our beautiful, perfect daughter arrived in March, and his sister's little boy came in April. I'm 38. This was my miracle baby, the one I'd waited my whole life for. His sister is 21. For her it was an oops, but a happy one, of course, because her life is one long, happy accident. And that's where the problem started. She didn't just bounce back. It's like the baby was never there. A flat stomach, tiny waist, not a single stretch mark. She paraded around in a crop top at the family barbecue 6 weeks postpartum. 6 weeks. I was still wearing adult diapers and wincing every time I sat down. My husband Mark started getting obsessed. He'd scroll through her Instagram showing me pictures. "Look at Chloe, isn't she amazing?" he'd say. And it felt like a knife twisting. Amazing. Yes, she's amazing. It's also amazing what you can achieve when your parents pay for a full-time nanny, a personal chef who specializes in postpartum nutrition, and a trainer who comes to your house 3 times a week. I don't have any of that. I have a baby who won't sleep unless she's on my chest. a C-section scar that still aches, and a hunger that feels like a black hole in my stomach from breastfeeding around the clock. The worst part is I gave him the ammunition he's using against me now. One night, I broke down. I was exhausted hormonal, and I just spent 10 minutes trying to zip up a pair of my old jeans and failing. I was looking at a picture Chloe had posted, a selfie in a bikini, and the comments were all fire emojis and people saying, "I wish I looked like you." I was crying, and I whispered to Mark, "I'd do anything to look like her. I just want to feel like myself again." I wanted him to hold me. I wanted him to say, "You're beautiful, you just had a baby. Be kind to yourself." I wanted him to see times me, times his wife, the mother of his child who was hurting. Instead, his eyes lit up. He saw a problem to be solved. And apparently, I was the problem. He went into what I call his fix-it mode. The next day he called Chloe. I heard him on the phone taking notes. So no carbs at all, okay. And processed foods, got it. Lots of vegetables. He came into the living room looking like he'd discovered the cure for cancer. "I've got the plan," he announced proudly. "We're going to do this. I'm going to help you." His help was a new kind of hell. He started watching everything I ate. If I reached for a cracker, he'd say, "Is that on Chloe's plan?" He'd make these huge, disgusting vegetable smoothies for breakfast that I had to choke down. He threw out the granola bars I kept by the bed for middle-of-the-night feeding sessions because they had too much sugar. My own home started to feel like a fat camp run by a drill sergeant who used to love me. I tried to explain to him that I'm breastfeeding, that I'm hungry all the time. I need calories. I need energy. I can't live on steamed kale and grilled chicken. He just waved it off. "Chloe's breastfeeding too, and she's not eating junk," he said. I wanted to scream that Chloe also gets 8 hours of uninterrupted sleep and has someone else cook her perfectly balanced, calorie-dense, and nutritious meals. I just get whatever I can grab with one hand while holding a screaming baby. Yesterday was the breaking point. He told me he'd take care of the groceries from now on to remove the temptation. I knew what that meant. Our fridge would become a green and beige prison of health foods I didn't have the time or energy to cook. So while he was at the gym, I took the baby and I went to the store myself. It felt like an act of rebellion. I bought the things that felt like home. A loaf of sourdough bread for toast in the morning, a box of pasta, and a jar of sauce for a 10-minute dinner. I even bought a bag of chocolate-covered pretzels, my one weakness. I wasn't planning on eating the whole bag. I just wanted to know it was there. I wanted one thing in my life that was just for me. One little piece of comfort that wasn't up for debate. I came home and hid the pretzels in the back of the pantry. I left the other groceries on the counter and went to put the baby down for her nap. She actually went down without a fight for once. It felt like a sign. A small victory. I walked back to the kitchen, my mouth already watering for a piece of toast, thick with butter. It was the only thing I'd been looking forward to all day. The first thing I noticed was the smell. A weird, savory, boiling vegetable smell. Mark was standing at the stove, stirring a big pot, his back to me. He was in his workout clothes, sweat still glistening on his neck. He turned around and gave me that bright problem solver smile. "Hey, honey. Just making us a healthy soup for dinner?" My eyes went to the counter where I'd left the grocery bag. It was gone. All of it. The bread, the pasta, the sauce. A cold dread started to creep up my spine. I walked over to the pantry and opened it. I pushed aside the quinoa and the cans of chickpeas. The back of the shelf was empty. My pretzels were gone too. I stood there for a moment, the pantry door open, just staring at the empty space where my little bit of happiness used to be. I took a slow breath and turned around to face him. He was still smiling, completely oblivious, like a hero waiting for his medal. I held out the spoon, offering her a taste of the soup. "I'm helping you. This is what you wanted, remember? You said you'd do anything to be like Chloe." Her face, which had been pale with confusion, turned a deep, blotchy red. "My food, Mark." "Where is it?" she said again, her voice low and tight like a wire about to snap. "It's gone," I said, trying to keep my tone even and reasonable. "I threw it out. We can't have that stuff in the house if we're serious about this. It's temptation." "You were sabotaging yourself the minute I turned my back." That's when the screaming started. It was like a dam breaking. Not just yelling, but this raw, guttural sound that didn't even seem like it could come from her. "I'm breastfeeding!" she shrieked, her hands flying up to her head. "I need to eat. I'm hungry all the time." That was my food. I put the spoon down, my frustration starting to boil over. Logic wasn't working. Chloe is breastfeeding too, and she's not eating bags of pretzels. It's an excuse. "Chloe has a cook!" she screamed back, tears now streaming down her face. "Chloe has a trainer! Chloe has her parents paying for a nanny so she can sleep 8 hours a night. Don't you dare compare me to her." Of course, I was comparing them. How else do you measure success? You take a goal, you look at the person who achieved it, and you replicate the steps. It's simple. It's efficient. "This isn't about her cook or her trainer," I said, raising my voice to be heard over her crying. "This is about simple choices. It's about putting down the bread and picking up a vegetable." She just shook her head, sobbing. "You don't get it. You haven't looked at me, not really, since our daughter was born. You look right through me. I'm just a project to you now. A problem you need to fix." She was twisting everything. This whole thing, this grand gesture of taking control and helping her, was my attempt to find her again. To bring back the woman who didn't sigh at her own reflection. To get back the connection she herself said she felt was fading. I was doing this times for us asterisk. I threw up my hands in defeat. Fine. I try to help you with the one thing you told me was making you miserable, and I'm the bad guy. I get it. She didn't say another word. She just turned and walked out of the kitchen. A minute later, I heard our bedroom door slam shut. I was left alone in the kitchen. The healthy soup simmering on the stove. A perfect logical solution that nobody wanted. The whole house was silent, except for the gentle bubbling of the pot. The next few days were a special kind of hell. A cold war fought in whispers and averted gazes. The soup sat in the fridge untouched. I'd eat a bowl for lunch, telling myself it was delicious, that it was the taste of discipline. She ate things that were technically healthy, but with a kind of quiet fury. She'd stand at the counter and eat a plain salad with no dressing or a piece of dry chicken, her jaw tight. She wasn't doing it to be healthy. She was doing it to spite me, to show me how miserable my plan was making her. She stopped talking to me about anything other than the baby. Does she need a diaper change? Can you watch her while I shower? Every question was transactional. The warmth was gone. I'd come home from work and the air in our house would be thick and heavy with everything she wasn't saying. One evening I found her in the nursery just holding our daughter and crying silently in the dark. I stood in the doorway wanting to go to her, to hold her, but I didn't know what to say. I'm sorry, I want you to be happy. Felt like the wrong move. I finally broke down and called my sister. I needed a sanity check. I don't get it, Chloe, I said, pacing in the backyard. I did exactly what you told me. I got rid of all the junk food, I made healthy meals, and she's acting like I committed a crime. There was a pause on the other end of the line. Mark! You threw her food away like in the trash. Yeah, she bought it right after I'd done the healthy shopping. It was a cry for help. I had to be the strong one. Oh, honey, no, Chloe sighed. And for a second I thought she was going to lecture me. But then she said, you can't just force it. It's a mindset. But you're right about the food. Getting all the processed carbs out of the house was the single most important step for me. It's just, you know how emotional she is. You have to be delicate. Emotional. That was it. That was the word. I wasn't wrong in my plan, just in my delivery. I hadn't accounted for how emotional she would be. Chloe understood. I felt a wave of relief. My logic was sound. I just needed to be more delicate. That night, I tried again. I went into the bedroom where she was folding baby clothes on the bed, her back to me. Hey, I said softly. I've been thinking. I get that I was a little aggressive. I'm sorry about that. But my goal was a good one. I just want you to feel good again. I want times to be good again. She didn't turn around. She just kept folding a tiny pink onesie with meticulous, angry precision. Do you know what would make me feel good, Mark? She said, her voice flat. It would be for my husband to think I was beautiful even if I still have a belly. It would be for him to bring me a cookie when I'm up at 3 a.m. with the baby. Not to throw my food in the garbage. It would be for him to hold me and tell me I'm a good mom, not hand me a diet plan based on his 1-year-old sister. She finally turned to look at me, and her eyes were empty. You didn't do this for me. You did this for you. You don't like how I look, and you thought you could fix me. I opened my mouth to argue, to explain that he was wrong, that she had it all backwards. But no words came out. Because in that moment, she didn't look like my wife. She looked like a stranger. A sad, tired stranger who was convinced I was her enemy. And I had no idea how to solve that. I had the blueprint, the plan, the perfect solution. And she just refused to see it. What are you supposed to do when someone you love doesn't want to be fixed? Story 3. My husband looks at me like I'm a stranger now. A monster who crept into our house and blew up our life for no reason. He wants a simple answer, a neat little box to put me in. I'm a cheater. I'm a bad person. End of story. But it's not that simple. Nothing is ever that simple. It started with the silence. Last year when lockdown hit, our world shrank to the four walls of our house. It should have been a blessing. We were safe. We both kept our jobs working from home. We had our beautiful little boy who was just learning to walk and fill the house with happy noises. But the silence I'm talking about wasn't about sound. It was the space between me and my husband. He was right there sitting in his office chair just a few feet away from mine, but he was gone. His mind was a million miles away, lost in a fog of worry. He was constantly stressed about money, about his parents getting sick, about whether his company would have layoffs. When I tried to talk to him, he'd nod and say, "Aha!" But his eyes were glazed over, staring at his screen or at a spot on the wall. He would say things like, "I'm just so glad I get to be here with my family, but I didn't feel like his family. I felt like a piece of furniture." I was the wife who made dinner, the mom who handled bath time. I was a function, a role, another part of the domestic life he was so terrified of losing. I was disappearing. And then I found out I was pregnant again. 10 weeks. I should have been thrilled, but all I felt was a wave of panic. I was already just mom. Now my body wasn't even going to be my own again. My identity was dissolving into motherhood completely. And I felt like I was drowning. That's when the little green dot on my work chat became my lifeline. It was a colleague, Mark. It started small, completely innocent. A joke about a pointless meeting, then he sent me a message after a big presentation I gave. "You killed it today," it said. It was nothing, really. But it was times something asterisk. It was a conversation that had nothing to do with grocery lists, or our son's teething schedule, or whose turn it was to take out the recycling. It was about me. For the first time in what felt like a year, someone saw times me, asterisk. Not the tired mom, not the stressed out wife. Just me. He thought I was funny. He thought I was smart. I would sit at my desk, my husband tapping away furiously a few feet from me, lost in his world of spreadsheets and anxiety, and I would be lost in my own world too. A secret world inside my computer where I was witty and interesting and alive. I felt a spark I thought was long dead. The chats became more frequent and more personal. We talked about everything. Our dreams before we got married, the stupid TV shows we were watching, our frustrations with work. It felt dangerous, and I knew it was wrong. We even said it to each other in the messages. "This is crazy," he'd write. "I know this is so wrong," I'd reply. But saying it was part of the thrill. It was a fantasy, a game. It wasn't a plan to blow up my life. It was an escape hatch from the life that was suffocating. Then the pregnancy really started to hit. The morning sickness, the bloating. I'd look at myself in the mirror and just feel gone. The person I knew was disappearing under this new layer of responsibility, this changing body. I felt formless and undesirable. One afternoon, I just had this desperate, stupid impulse. I needed to see myself the woman I was afraid of losing forever. So I took some photos. They were revealing, yes, but I was trying to capture something, proof that a sexual confident person was still in there somewhere. Sending them to Mark was the moment I stepped off the cliff. It was a reckless, horrible decision. But the validation that came back, the messages telling me I was beautiful and desirable, it was like a drug. It quieted the voice in my head that told me I was just a tired, pregnant mom. We decided to meet for coffee. It was awkward. The easy chemistry we had online didn't quite work in person. We were just two nervous people making small talk in a parking lot. But we kept talking online, and the fantasy pulled us back in. We met a second time, a week later. We sat in his car, talking about nothing, and the air was thick with this weird tension. Then he leaned over and kissed me. It was nothing. Absolutely nothing like I'd imagined. It was a quick, clumsy, awkward press of lips. There was no spark, no magic. In that 1 second, the entire fantasy world I'd built came crashing down. The thrill wasn't real. The connection was just words on a screen. The kiss just made me feel empty and incredibly guilty. The magic was in being seen, not being touched. I drove home that afternoon with a pit in my stomach. All I wanted was to erase the last 3 months. To delete every message, every picture, and go back to being the person I was before. I felt sick with myself. I walked into the house and my husband was on the sofa scrolling through his phone with that same worried look on his face. I put my purse and keys on the counter, leaving my phone there with them. I just wanted a shower. I wanted to wash the whole day off me. I went upstairs to check on our son, who was napping in his crib. When I came back downstairs a few minutes later, my husband was standing by the counter. He was holding my phone in his hand, his thumb frozen over the screen. He wasn't looking at me. He was just staring down at the glowing light. The whole room felt suddenly cold and silent. He looked up slowly, and his face was like stone. I had never seen that expression on him before. It was completely blank, but underneath it, I could see something cracking. He held the phone up just a little. "Sarah?" he said. His voice was quiet. Dangerously quiet. "What is this?" On the screen was one of the photos I'd sent Mark. My heart stopped. The air in the room just vanished. For a second, my brain couldn't form a thought. There was just a loud rushing sound in my ears. They're for me," I stammered the lie, tasting like ash in my mouth. "I took them for myself. You know, before the bump gets big. Just to feel good." It was such a stupid, pathetic thing to say, but it was the only thing I could grab onto. The worst part is, it was partly true. That's what made it such a terrible lie. He didn't yell. That would have been easier. Instead, he just kept his eyes on the phone and slowly shook his head. For you, he said, his voice flat and dead. Sarah, they're in a Teams chat. My whole body went cold. Of course. He wasn't just seeing the picture, he was seeing where it was. My stomach dropped. The fantasy world I had so carefully built on my computer screen had just crashed into my real life, and the explosion was happening in slow motion right in my kitchen. Who did you send them to? He asked, still not looking at me. I couldn't speak. He looked up then, and the blankness in his eyes was gone. It was replaced with something hard and broken. Who? He repeated, his voice starting to crack. Mark, I whispered. The name felt like a foreign object in our house. He didn't know who Mark was, but he didn't need to. The questions came one after another like hammer blows. He wasn't screaming. He was interrogating me. Every question was quiet, precise, and designed to rip another piece of the truth out. Have you been sleeping with him? No, God, no. Have you met him? My throat was closing up. I couldn't lie anymore. Yes, I said, my voice barely audible. How many times? Twice? And he pushed. What happened? Nothing, I said quickly. We just talked. Coffee? He just stared at me, his face unreadable. He knew I was still holding something back. He could see it. I finally broke. He kissed me. I choked out tears, finally starting to stream down my face. It was the second time we met. It was a mistake. It was stupid and it meant nothing. I swear it meant nothing to me. Flinched a tiny, almost invisible movement, but it was like I'd physically hit him. He didn't say anything. He just walked over to the sofa, my phone still in his hand, and sat down. He unlocked it again. And he started to read. He scrolled back all the way to the beginning. 3 months ago. I just stood by the counter frozen, unable to move or speak. I watched him read every message. I saw his expression shift as he read our inside jokes about work. I saw his jaw clench when he got to the flirting, the compliments, the late-night messages where we shared things we weren't sharing with anyone else. I watched him read the messages where we both said, "This is wrong." I watched as the man I loved, the father of my child, sat on our sofa and discovered a complete stranger who had been living inside my phone, a version of me that I had created to escape him. It took him almost 2 hours. 2 hours of complete agonizing silence broken only by the sound of his thumb scrolling on the screen. When he was done, he placed the phone on the coffee table like it was a piece of evidence. He finally looked at me, and the man I knew was gone. In his place was someone I didn't recognize, his face hollowed out with pain and disgust. That was 3 weeks ago. The silence in our house now is a different kind. It's not the empty, distant silence of before. This silence is heavy, suffocating. It's filled with everything we can't say. He sleeps on the sofa. We only speak when it's about our son. Simple logistical things. Did you feed him dinner? He needs a bath. The day after he found out, he demanded my phone and all my passwords. My laptop, my social media, everything. He calls it total transparency. I call it a prison. He checks my location on an app. He can read every text I send. He needs to know where I am and who I'm talking to at all times. I have no privacy, no space that is my own anymore. The secret world I built for myself has been replaced by a cage he built for both of us. I've tried a few times to explain. To tell him about the loneliness, about feeling so completely invisible that I just needed someone, anyone, to see me. I tried to tell him that it was never about Mark. It was about the hole inside myself. Every time I start, he cuts me off. "Don't you dare blame this on me," he sees his voice low and full of venom. "This isn't my fault. This is about you. You are selfish and you are a liar. Stop making excuses." He doesn't want to understand times why asterisk. He just wants me to confess, to plead guilty to being a monster. Maybe if I just say the words, "I am a horrible person," it will give him the simple answer he's looking for. But it's not that simple. I did a terrible thing. I broke his trust. And I might have destroyed our family. I know that. I hate myself for it every single second of the day. But my reasons were real. My pain was real. We have our first marriage counseling session in 2 days. He only agreed to go after I begged him, crying on the floor. But I know he isn't going there to fix us. He's going there to have a professional witness my trial. He wants a therapist to validate his anger, to tell him that he is the victim and I am the villain. He wants her to diagnose me with some moral sickness. He says I threw our life away, that I traded our marriage for a cheap thrill with a coworker. He doesn't understand that I wasn't trying to throw anything away. I was desperately trying to find a piece of myself I thought I had lost forever. I was drowning and I grabbed onto a piece of driftwood, not realizing it was attached to a bomb. Now everything is blown up and I think I might have lost him, our family, and myself in the explosion. Story 4. I'm his wife. I'm the one you all read about, the one who sexted another man with her daughter in the back seat. I'm the monster who kept a diary about it. I know what you think of me, but you don't know what it's like to slowly disappear inside your own life. My life is a cage. It's a comfortable cage, painted in soft, neutral colors, but it's still a cage. And my husband, the man you all feel so sorry for, is the kind, gentle warden. He brings me my meals, makes sure I take my medicine, and locks the door every night to keep me safe. It wasn't always like this. In college, he was different. He was passionate and alive. A little possessive, maybe, but I thought it was romantic. Then came that thing with the texts. A guy from one of my classes, someone I barely knew, sent me some stupid, flirty messages. My husband, my boyfriend back then, found them on my phone. He didn't yell. He never yells. He just got quiet and looked so hurt, so betrayed. I spent days apologizing for something I didn't even do for someone else's words. Looking back, I see it for what it was. It wasn't about me cheating. It was his first attempt to build a fence around me, to be the only person I was connected to. The real walls didn't go up until my seizures got bad. My epilepsy isn't the kind you see in movies. It's a constant low-level hum of anxiety in the back of my mind. The big ones are rare, but the small ones, the ones that make me lose time or just stare blankly into space, can happen anytime. I can't drive. I can't be left alone with our daughter for too long. My world shrank and he became my full-time manager. After our daughter was born, the fence became a fortress. He stopped seeing a wife. He saw a patient. Every single thing we did together became a risk assessment. Did you take your meds? You look tired. You should lie down. Don't overdo it. Here, let me carry that. I know he thought he was being a good husband. He times a good man, a wonderful father. That's what makes it so much worse. You can't scream at a man who is gently, lovingly suffocating you to death. You just lie there and let the air run out. He complains he became a grayed-out zombie, but he became that person long before I did. He was a man going through the motions of caretaking, not partnership. Sex became a checklist item. Another thing to be careful about. Could it trigger a seizure? Was I too tired? There was no passion, just procedure. I was a walking pre-existing condition he had to manage. And I was so alone. I was invisible in my own home. Then someone saw me. My colleague, let's call him Mark, he actually saw times me asterisk. We started working on a project together. He didn't know about my seizures at first. He just saw a woman who was smart and funny and good at her job. He'd laugh at my stupid jokes. He'd listen when I talked about a book I was reading, not just nod while secretly counting the pills in my weekly organizer. We became friends. Real friends. The kind of friends I hadn't had since before my diagnosis took over my identity. That day at the gas station. It was a breaking point. My husband was in the store with our daughter getting her a snack. I could see them through the window. He was crouched down laughing with her, his face lit up. He was in his perfect dad bubble. I was just the fixture in the passenger seat, the cargo he had to transport from one safe place to another. I felt like a ghost. Then my phone buzzed. It was Mark sending a joke. I wrote back. He wrote back something flirty. And I just leaned into it. It was a jolt of electricity in my grayed-out world. It was stupid, and so reckless to do it right there. But I was so trapped, so desperate to feel something real, something that was just for me. For a few minutes, I wasn't a patient or a mother. I was just a woman talking to a man who found her desirable. The diary was my only escape. It was the one place on earth I didn't have to pretend. I wrote everything down. My husband thinks my other life was this secret world away from him and our daughter. He's wrong. My other life was the one he managed the life of the sickly, dependent woman in our quiet gray house. The affair, the feelings I had for Mark, that was my times, real times life. It was messy and wrong, but it was mine. I wrote about the one-night stand. I had a desperate and clumsy attempt to feel something physical after our daughter was born, and my husband started treating me like glass. I wrote about Mark, about our conversations, about how it felt to be seen. The work trip was supposed to be a breath of fresh air. A whole week of being a person. I told my husband it was a mandatory conference. It was, but Mark was going too. We shared a hotel room. It wasn't some wild, passionate romance. We talked for hours. We ordered room service and watched bad movies. I could snuggle up against him on the couch without him putting a hand on my forehead to check for a fever or asking if my aura felt weird. He saw me. Just me. But it was complicated. I felt so much guilt, so much confusion. This person saw me, the real me, but he couldn't have all of me. And I couldn't leave the life, the daughter I loved. I filled the last pages of my diary on the flight home, trying to sort through the mess in my head. I was terrified, but also hopeful. Maybe I could find a way to integrate these two worlds to bring some of that whole alive person back into my cage. I tucked the diary deep into the side pocket of my travel bag before I got off the plane. The house was quiet when I got home. Too quiet. My daughter was already in bed. My husband was sitting on the couch, not watching TV, just staring at the blank screen. "Hey," I said, trying to sound normal, my heart starting to pound. "Long flight." He didn't turn around. He just said, his voice flat and empty, "Welcome home. How was the trip?" "It was fine. Work stuff, you know." I dropped my keys on the counter, my hands shaking a little. I just wanted to go upstairs, take a shower, and pretend to be the person he expected me to be. "I put your bag in the bedroom," he said, still not looking at me. I nodded, even though he couldn't see me. "Thanks. I'm exhausted. I think I'm just going to head up." I walked into our bedroom. My travel bag was on the floor by the closet, and the side zipper, the one I had carefully, deliberately zipped shut on the plane, was open. My blood went cold. It was like one of my seizures, but I was wide awake for this one. The world tilted, and all the sound rushed out of the room. The zipper. That stupid little metal zipper was smiling at me wide open. I had checked it. I know I had. I zipped it shut on the plane, tucking my whole secret life away. But there it was. Open. I didn't even need to look inside. I knew the diary was gone. My stomach dropped. I felt dizzy sick. For a second, I just stood there, staring at the empty side pocket of my bag, my hand half raised like I could somehow undo it. Then I walked back downstairs. My legs felt like they were moving through wet cement. He was still on the couch, but he had turned to face the stairs. And there it was on the coffee table between us. My diary! Open! He had it laid out like a piece of evidence at a trial. My trial. "I know," he said. His voice wasn't angry. It was worse. It was dead. The voice he used when a doctor gave us bad news about my medication. Calm, detached, absorbing a problem. I just stared at it. What was I supposed to say? The air was so thick I could barely breathe. "I know about the other guy," he continued, as if I hadn't heard him. He gestured at the diary. "All of it. The texts I saw at the gas station were just the tip of the iceberg, weren't they? The one-night stand after our daughter was born? The whole week with your colleague, Mark. Hearing him say the name felt like a physical blow. It was a name from my real life, spoken out loud in my cage, and it sounded dirty and wrong coming from his mouth. This wasn't a conversation. This wasn't a heartbroken husband pleading for answers. This was an interrogation. He had his evidence, his neatly organized case file, and he was laying it out for the jury. He didn't want an explanation. He wanted a confession. He wanted me to break down, cry, and tell him he was right, that his snooping was justified, that his version of me as a traitor was the correct one. I couldn't give him that. "What do you want me to say?" I finally managed to get out. My voice was a whisper. "The truth would be a good start," he said, his voice hard as stone. "For once." But he didn't want my truth. My truth was messy and complicated. My truth was about years of feeling invisible, of being a chore on a to-do list. My truth was that our marriage had died of suffocation long before Mark ever came into the picture. His truth was simple. I cheated. I was bad. He was the victim. So I did the only thing I could. I denied him his victory. I refused to confess. "I'm not talking about this," I said, wrapping my arms around myself. "Not like this. Not after you went through my things." It was a last desperate attempt to protect the one tiny corner of my life that had felt like my own. It wasn't even a lie to him anymore. It was a refusal. A final act of rebellion. Of course, he didn't see it that way. He saw a liar cornered and still lying. His face, which had been a cold mask, finally cracked. Not with sadness, but with a kind of disgusted certainty. "Right," he said, nodding slowly. "Of course. You're not going to talk about it." He picked up his phone from the coffee table. We stood there in a silence that felt louder than screaming. He had already called someone. I knew it. He had a plan. He always has a plan. I was just the problem he needed to solve. The doorbell rang. The sound made me jump. He didn't move, just looked at me. He was waiting for me to see the final piece of his plan fall into place. I walked to the door like a zombie and opened. It was my father. My heart shattered into a million pieces. My own dad. He looked exhausted. He looked past me, his eyes landing on my husband, standing in the living room. He walked right by me as if I wasn't even there, and went straight to him. He put his arms around my husband and gave him a hug, a solid, supportive hug. A hug that said, times, "I'm on your side. We'll get through this." Asterisk. Then he turned and looked at me. There was no anger in his eyes, just a deep, profound disappointment that I knew so well. It was the same look I got when I had a seizure at a family dinner, or when I had to tell him I couldn't drive my own daughter to his house. It was the look that said times, "You are the problem to be managed," asterisk. "Your husband called me," he said, his voice heavy. He told me what happened. In that moment, it was all confirmed. To them, I wasn't a person who had made a terrible, complicated mistake. I was a liability. The broken daughter, the cheating wife, the sick woman who couldn't be trusted. My husband and my father, the two men who were supposed to be my protectors, were now united against me, their faces etched with the same weary resignation. "Go pack a bag," my dad said. It wasn't a suggestion. "You're coming to stay with me for a while." I didn't argue. What was the point? I had been officially exiled. I walked back upstairs, my husband and father watching me go, and packed a few things into a different bag, a smaller one. I felt completely hollow. I could hear them murmuring downstairs, planning my life without me in it. I looked around the bedroom that was no longer mine at the life I had tried so desperately to escape and had now completely destroyed. When I came back down, my husband wouldn't look at me. He was just staring at the wall, his jaw tight. My dad took my bag from my hand. I walked out the front door of my own house, the house where I'd brought my baby home, and didn't look back. I'm at my dad's house now in my childhood bedroom. It's been 3 days. I haven't heard from my husband. My dad brings me meals and makes sure I take my meds. It's a new cage, but an old familiar one. I know what you're thinking. That I got what I deserve. Maybe I did. I hurt a good man, a man who tried his best to take care of me. I know that. I see his pained face in my mind every time I close my eyes. But I can't bring myself to regret the feeling of being seen. I can't regret the few weeks where I felt like a whole person instead of a collection of symptoms. The affair was a symptom, not the disease. The disease was the quiet, gray life where I had no identity beyond patient. I tried to build another life, a real one in secret. And when my two worlds crashed into each other, they both burned to the ground. I lost my husband, my home, and I don't know when I'll see my daughter again. I've been officially cast as the villain in my own story. And the worst part is, I don't know if I'll ever be able to convince anyone, even myself, that I was just trying to be the hero.
Story 5.
You've probably already heard her side of the story. She's probably told you I'm a lazy, disgusting slob, that I drove her away with my mess. And she's not wrong about the mess. But she's wrong about why. She thinks I didn't care. The truth is, I cared so much, it broke me. My world has walls, and I don't mean the ones in our apartment. They're inside my head, and they've been getting higher for years. I ended up in the hospital back in 2017 because I tried to tear them down the wrong way. I was suicidal, and honestly, I was terrified. When she asked me to marry her a year later, it felt like someone was finally handing me the tools to build a door in those walls. I thought her love would be a new foundation. I thought with her I could finally build a life on the outside. But the panic never really went away. It's like a low hum in the back of my mind that never, ever stops. The outside world is so loud. It's full of jobs and bills and expectations and people who seem to know how to just exist. I can't do it. Most days, just getting out of bed feels like a marathon. My laptop became my safe place. It's a window I can close anytime I want. The friends I made online, the communities I was a part of, they were real to me. They didn't see the piles of clothes on the floor or the empty mugs on the nightstand. They didn't see the evidence of my failure all around me. They just saw my words. They saw me. She called our bedroom a hoard. That word hurts. It wasn't a hoard. It was more like a nest. Or maybe a monument to all my failures. Every shirt on the floor was a decision I couldn't make. Every takeout container was a meal I didn't have the energy to cook. To her, it was just trash. To me, it was my paralysis made physical. When she would talk about cleaning, it didn't sound like a request. It sounded like an accusation. Her little reminders were just echoes of the voice in my own head that was already screaming at me 24/7. Asterisk. You're worthless. You're pathetic. Look at this mess you've made of your life. Asterisk. I wanted to do it for her. I wanted to be the person she deserved. But wanting and doing are on opposite sides of a giant canyon in my brain, and I've never figured out how to build a bridge. I started sleeping on the couch. She thought it was because I didn't want to be near her. It was because to get into our bed, I had to literally climb over a mountain of my own inadequacy and then lie down next to the one person I was disappointing most. It was easier to just stay outside the room where my failure was piled up to the ceiling. Then she gave me the deadline. July 1st. It wasn't a goal, it was a threat. Asterisk. Fix yourself by then or I'm gone. Asterisk. It didn't motivate me. It terrified me. The fear was so big it just froze me in place. Every day that ticked by the mountain in our bedroom grew taller in my mind. It became this impossible mythical beast I could never defeat. She thinks I just forgot about the date, or that I didn't take it seriously. I never thought about anything else. It was branded onto the inside of my eyelids. Our anniversary was in June. I thought maybe for one day we could just be us again. But she brought it all up. She told me how tired she was, how I'd made her a pack mule in her own home, forced to carry the weight of everything. She took a day that was supposed to be about our love and turned it into a performance review of all my failings. It crushed what little spirit I had left. After that, I tried. I really did. I managed to get a few bags of trash out of the room. It felt like a monumental victory to me. It took every ounce of energy I had. I felt like I'd run an actual marathon. But when she saw them, she just sighed. It was nothing to her. Just a drop in the ocean. I begged her to stop nagging me about it. Not because I didn't want to do it, but because every time she mentioned it, it was like another heavy brick being placed on my chest. It made it harder to breathe, let alone summon the strength to move a mountain. On the night of June 30th, she came home from work and stood in the doorway of the living room where I was on the couch. She didn't even look at me, just at the closed bedroom door. "It's not done, is it?" she said. It wasn't a question. I couldn't say anything. I just shook my head. "I'm done," she said. Her voice was flat, empty. I can't do this anymore. It felt like the world stopped spinning. For years, she had been my anchor. The one solid thing in my life when everything else was spinning out of control. And in that moment, the anchor didn't just pull away. It snapped. The rope broke, and I was adrift in a silent, terrifying ocean. The only person who saw every ugly part of me, the parts I hid from the rest of the world, was choosing to unsee me forever. She went into the bedroom, stepping over the piles without a word, and started packing a bag. The world just went silent. As I sat there on the couch, listening to the sounds of her packing, it was like I was underwater. Everything was muffled and slow. The only thing I could think was times no, no, please, no asterisk. When she came out with her duffel bag, I finally found my voice. It was small and shaky. Just give me a week, I whispered. 1 week. I'll fix it. I promise. She paused at the door, her hand on the knob. She didn't turn around. You've had years, honey. And then she was gone. The click of the lock felt like a gunshot. For the first time in years, the crushing weight of my depression was replaced by something else, pure, undiluted panic. It was so sharp, so electric, it was almost like energy. It was horrible, but it was fuel. I stood up, and for the first time in forever, I walked into our bedroom, and I didn't see a mountain. I saw a battlefield, and I was finally ready to fight. I cleaned. I worked for 3 days straight, fueled by nothing but fear and stale crackers. Every bag of trash I filled felt like I was shedding a layer of dead skin. I found things I thought I'd lost forever. Books, old photos, a sweater of hers. Each one was a punch to the gut. I was literally throwing away the life we had built. I texted her updates, pictures of cleared out corners. I told her the work was spiritually edifying, and I wasn't lying. For a few hours at a time, I felt a flicker of the person I used to be. The person she fell in love with. I thought if she could just see that she would come home. But the house was so empty. The silence was the worst part. It pressed in on me from all sides, amplifying the screaming in my own head. I was so scared. I broke down and called my dad. I wasn't trying to manipulate her, I swear. I was just terrified and alone, and I needed an adult. I needed someone to tell me I wasn't going to die. I asked him to call her just to let her know I was trying. That this wasn't some game. I just wanted her to know I was fighting for her. For us. A few days later, I texted her. Asterix, I know the apartment isn't the point. It's my emotional progress that really matters, and I'm making it. Asterix. I was begging her. Begging her to see times me times under all the garbage. To see that the real work, the hard work, was happening inside my head. Her reply came back almost instant. Asterisk. The apartment is the only proof of emotional progress I'll accept. Asterisk. And just like that, the fuel ran out. The panic subsided and the old heavy blanket of depression settled back over me. Finally understood. She didn't want me to get better. She just wanted the mess to be gone. The physical proof was all she ever cared about. All my fighting, all my effort. It didn't matter. The person inside was irrelevant. I retreated back to the bedroom. It was cleaner, but it felt colder, emptier. The energy to walk to the kitchen for food just wasn't there anymore. It felt like another impossible mountain to climb. So I did the only thing I could think of. I went into the kitchen, unplugged the 40-pound microwave, and I wrestled that stupid heavy box back into the bedroom. I put it on the floor in a corner and plugged it in. It wasn't about strength. She'd probably tell you it was proof I was faking my helplessness all along. It wasn't. It was proof of how desperate I was. It was a survival instinct, like an animal dragging food back to its den because it's too scared and broken to go outside. Then my mother called. She was hysterical. "What did you do?" she shrieked into the phone. "What did you do to her?" I was confused, trying to calm her down, and then I heard it. My wife's voice in the background, sharp and clear. "Just tell her," she said to my mom. "Tell her she's your problem now. I'm done." I was handed back. Like a broken appliance, you return to the manufacturer. I was no longer her wife. I was her mistake. A defective product being sent back to my parents. The one person I thought would love me through sickness and in health was not only leaving me, but making sure my own family knew I was a burden she refused to carry any longer. I moved back in with my parents a week later. The apartment was still half clean. My mom comes into my room sometimes and just looks at me. She told her sister I'm being stoic about the whole thing. That I don't even say I miss her. How can I miss a part of me that was amputated? There's just a raw, gaping wound where she used to be. The pain is too big for words like miss. It's just a constant, silent ache. And then, about a month ago, a mutual friend let it slip. My wife, my ex-wife, I guess, is with someone new. The college friend. The one she went to stay with on June 30th. Suddenly it all clicked into place. The deadline, the refusal to see my effort, the way she cut me off so cleanly. She wasn't just leaving a mess. She was running towards something clean and new. I wasn't a partner she was trying to save anymore. I was an obstacle. A messy, complicated, mentally ill obstacle she had to clear out of her path so she could get to her next life. She didn't leave because of the trash. The trash was just the perfect excuse. It made her the victim, and me, the monster. It was a simple, clean story she could tell everyone, and no one would ever have to know the ugly, complicated truth. And I guess in the end, that's what she always wanted. For things to be simple. And I was never, ever simple. Story 6. Okay, you want my side of the story. I'm sure my husband has told you his. He's probably the victim, the good guy who was betrayed by his monster of a wife. I know how he spins things. He's been spinning our entire marriage into a perfect story for 20 years. But the truth is, you can't betray something that's already dead. And our marriage was a beautiful, perfectly preserved corpse. For years, I was his greatest achievement. I wasn't his wife. I was his masterpiece. He looked at me the way a man looks at a classic car he's kept in a climate-controlled garage. He'd admire the finish, check the engine, and make sure it was polished for display. He loved the idea of me. He loved that we were the couple everyone else envied. He loved winning. Our marriage was just the longest game he'd ever played. It was all about control, but in the quietest way. He never yelled. He never had to. He just managed me. He bought me one of those fancy rings that tracks your sleep. And every morning he'd say, "You only got 82% deep sleep. You must be tired," instead of, "Good morning, I love you." He knew my car's mileage by heart. He'd comment if I took a different route to the grocery store. "Our home had cameras for security," he said, but I felt like an actress on a 24/7 reality show. He wasn't a partner, he was a warden. Even the small things felt like a performance. He had a vasectomy 10 years ago, but he insisted I stay on the birth control pill. He said it was good for my hormones, kept me regular, but I knew what it really was. It was a routine, a checkbox, another part of the perfect wife package he could manage. Every day that little pill was a reminder that my body, my life was just another system he was monitoring. The emptiness was the loudest thing in our house. I was screaming on the inside, but he was probably just checking the decibel levels. I needed to do something that he couldn't track or predict. I needed to feel real. That's where the affair started. It was a gasp for air in a room where all the oxygen had been sucked out. With him, my lover, I wasn't an investment. I wasn't a project. I was just a woman. Messy and alive and wanted for who I was in that moment. Not for a 2-decade-long track record of perfection. He made me laugh. He touched me like he was discovering something new, not just doing routine maintenance. And yes, it was. With my husband's coworker. The irony wasn't lost on me. I knew my husband was suspicious almost immediately. I could feel it. The way he looked at me changed. His gaze wasn't warm or concerned. It was analytical. He was a scientist, studying a strange new bacteria. He wasn't looking at his wife. He was looking for clues. So I gave him one. I went to our family doctor and got a full STD panel. It was the responsible thing to do, but it was also a test. I knew Dr. Evans was a bit of an old-fashioned gossip and that he and my husband played golf together. I knew there was a good chance something would be mentioned. A real husband, a man in love, would have been shattered. He would have confronted me, cried, screamed. Something. Anything. My husband. He came home a week later and casually mentioned that doctor. Evans had told him he should get tested too, just as a precaution these days. He said it with the same emotional investment as telling me we were out of milk. He didn't ask me if I was okay. He didn't ask me who. He just logged it in his brain as Exhibit A. The moment it all broke for me, though, was the day he searched my car. I got a call from my lover. He wasn't panicked. He was trying not to laugh. He told me my husband had asked him to help look for something in my car, pretending he'd lost a cufflink. My lover played along the loyal friend, helping his buddy. He described my husband on his hands and knees, methodically pulling up floor mats, checking under the seats, completely detached. He wasn't a man ripped apart by jealousy. He was Sherlock Holmes enjoying a puzzle. My lover met me later that day. He looked at me, his eyes full of a strange mix of pity and fascination. "He doesn't care that you're with me," he said. "He just wants to win. This is a game to him. He wants to catch you." And in that second, I knew he was right. The last 20 years hadn't been a marriage. It had been a competition, and I was just the trophy. All the pain I felt, all the guilt, it didn't matter to him. The only thing that mattered was that his perfect system had a bug, and he was going to be the one to find it. So we decided to change the game. If he wanted to be a detective, we'd give him a case that would burn him to the ground. We were going to push and push until the real man, the one I married, the one with a heart, finally showed up. Or we'd prove he was never there at all. That night, we set up an anonymous email account. My lover took a photo of me on his phone. It wasn't crazy explicit, just me in a t-shirt, no bra, with a look on my face my husband hadn't seen in a decade. A look of pure, unmanaged happiness. My hands were shaking as my lover typed out a simple subject line, "Thought you should see this." He attached the photo and sent it to my husband's personal email. We sat there in silence, staring at the screen. This was it. This had to be it. No man could see a picture like that of his wife sent from a stranger and not absolutely explode. We waited for the angry call, the sound of his car screeching into the driveway. We waited for the end of the world. A few minutes later, a notification popped up. A reply. My heart stopped. He'd written back to the anonymous address. I leaned in my breath, caught in my throat, and read the single line he had sent. "Nice try with the Photoshop, but that's not my wife." My lover and I just stared at the screen. We read the line over and over. "Nice try with the Photoshop, but that's not my wife." He wasn't heartbroken. He wasn't even angry. He was taunting us. He was playing a game trying to bait the anonymous sender into giving him more information. My blood ran cold, then hot. All the guilt I'd been carrying evaporated and was replaced with pure white-hot rage. He didn't see a picture of his wife in another man's arms. He saw an opponent making a move in a chess game. "He's calling our bluff," my lover whispered, his voice tight. "He thinks we'll get scared and back down." I shook my head. No. He thinks he's smarter than us. He thinks he can't lose. I looked at my lover, a reckless idea forming in my mind. "So, let's give him proof he can't deny." What we did next felt like jumping off a cliff into a storm. There was no more pretense of this being a simple cry for help. This was an attack. We took more pictures, pictures that left nothing to the imagination. Pictures that showed my face clearly filled with a pleasure he hadn't given me in years. Pictures that included my lover, his coworker, the man he trusted. We made sure they were undeniable. Each click of the camera phone felt like a point of no return. My heart hammered against my ribs, not with fear, but with a terrifying sense of power. For the first time in my marriage, I was the one in control of the narrative. We sent them all in one email. No subject line. No message. Just a gallery of our betrayal. And then we waited. The taunting reply never came. This time there was only silence. A deep, heavy silence that lasted for a whole day. I didn't hear from him. He didn't come home for lunch. My texts went unanswered. The quiet was 1,000 times more terrifying than his smug email had been. For a moment I thought I'd finally done it. I'd finally broken him. I imagined him shattered, grieving, finally feeling the pain a normal husband would feel. I almost felt a pang of regret. Then he came home from work. He walked in, placed his briefcase by the door with his usual precision, and loosened his tie. He didn't look at me. He walked straight to the kitchen, poured himself a glass of water, and drank it in one go. The silence was so thick I could barely breathe. I stood in the living room, frozen, waiting for the explosion. He finally walked over to me. He wasn't crying. His face wasn't red with rage. It was a cold, tight mask. He pulled out his phone and placed it on the coffee table between us, the screen lit up with the photos we'd sent. He let me look at them for a long moment before he spoke. His voice was low and flat. "I feel like a fool." That was it. Not "you broke my heart." Not "how could you do this to us?" Just "I feel like a fool." My grand experiment, my desperate attempt to provoke a human emotion had worked. And the emotion was wounded pride. He wasn't hurt because I'd been with another man. He was furious because I had outsmarted him. The betrayal of our vows was a footnote. The real crime was the damage to his ego. He'd been played, and his own coworker had helped do it. Smiling at him across the office all day while knowing this. "I know," I said, my voice surprisingly steady. "You weren't supposed to be a detective. You were supposed to be my husband." I told him everything then. I told him about the years of feeling like an exhibit in a museum. About the sleep ring, the cameras, the quiet, suffocating control. I told him I was so numb I just wanted to feel anything. And that when I realized he was hunting me instead of grieving for us, I just wanted him to feel something too. I laid it all bare, expecting, I don't know what. A final breakdown. A demand for a divorce. Instead, as I spoke, I saw his eyes flicker from my face down to the phone and back again. The tight anger in his jaw didn't disappear, but something else joined it. A strange, dark curiosity. And as he stared at a picture of me and his coworker, I saw it. A flicker of something I hadn't seen in a decade. It wasn't love. It wasn't even pure hate. It was arousal. My stomach turned. He was turned on. The whole disgusting, messy, humiliating truth of it. His wife with his friend, the photos, the lies. It was exciting to him. The perfect sterile life we'd built was boring. This was new. This was a challenge. He didn't leave me. He didn't even yell. The days that followed were the strangest of my life. The old marriage was dead and buried, but a new one, something twisted and unsettling, began to grow in its place. He started asking questions, but not the ones a husband should. He didn't ask if I loved him. He asked for details. What did we do? Where did we go? He wanted the mechanics of it all, collecting new data points for his system. He'd look at me from across the dinner table, and I could see him replaying the photos in his mind. The surveillance didn't stop. It just changed its purpose. Before, he was tracking a perfect asset. Now he was studying a damaged one. And he found it far more fascinating. Our life together, once a performance of passionless perfection, became charged with this sick energy. He was no longer the curator of the perfect wife. He was the master of a broken one. And God help me, he was more into me than he had been in years. I wanted to break the game, but I just gave him a new, darker one to play. I didn't get my husband back, not the man I once loved. I unearthed something else entirely. I set out to make him see me, and he finally does. But he doesn't see a woman in pain. He sees the prize, the villain and his co-conspirator all rolled into one. It's sick. It's wrong. But after so many years of feeling absolutely nothing, at least this is a feeling.
Story 7.
I'm the wife who cheated. I know what you're probably thinking, and you're not wrong. I broke our vows. I broke his heart. I'm the villain in the story he tells everyone, and honestly, I get it. But you've only heard his side. You've only seen the black and white picture he painted, where he's the perfect, unsuspecting victim, and I'm the monster who blew up our lives for no reason. It's a much easier story to tell than the truth. The truth is, our marriage died a long time before I ever even had lunch with another man. It died quietly in a house that was always clean, with bills that were always paid on time. We met when we were 16. It was the kind of story people love to hear. High school sweethearts. We grew up together, went to the same state college, got married at 25. We were that couple. The one everyone pointed to as proof that true love was real. On the outside, we were a perfect museum piece, a beautiful exhibit of a relationship that had lasted over a decade. Everyone admired it, but they only saw it from behind the glass. Inside, it was suffocating. We weren't a team anymore. We were just two people who had known each other for a long time. The conversations became routines. How was your day? Fine. What do you want for dinner? I don't care. He stopped looking at me like he saw times me asterisk. He just saw the wife, the other half of the perfect picture. I wasn't a person with changing thoughts and fears and dreams. I was a permanent fixture in his life, and he stopped tending to it. Then, about 2 years ago, my life imploded. My mom was diagnosed with early onset Alzheimer's. It was devastating. My family was a mess, and I was trying to hold everyone together while falling apart myself. I needed my husband. I needed a partner to lean on, to cry with, to tell me it would be okay even if we both knew it wouldn't. He was there physically. He would put his arm around me at family dinners and say all the right supportive husband things. But when we got home, he was a ghost. I'd be crying in the kitchen, and he'd walk in, see me, and just start making a sandwich as if nothing was wrong. He'd ask if I remembered to take out the recycling. He was a curator, not a husband. His only job was to make sure the exhibit looked perfect, polishing the glass while I was screaming on the inside. I felt so completely alone. I was drowning, and the person who was supposed to be my lifeguard was standing on the shore, calmly describing the water. That's when I met Alex at work. It wasn't some dramatic movie-like encounter. He was just a guy on my team. We started getting lunch. For the first time, I told someone what was happening with my mom, and they actually listened. He didn't offer empty solutions or change the subject. He just listened. He asked questions. He remembered details I told him weeks later. He saw me. Not the 16-year-old girl my husband was still married to in his head, but the tired, scared, 8-year-old woman I had become. It felt like oxygen. The affair wasn't a plan. It was a slow slide into something I couldn't stop because it was the only thing that made me feel real. It started with talks, then texts, then drinks after work. And one day he kissed me and I didn't pull away. Because for the first time in years, I felt like someone had actually chosen me right here, right now. I know what everyone fixates on. That it happened in our house. In our bed. They see it as the ultimate act of disrespect, a desecration. But that house hadn't felt like a home for so long. It was a stage where we performed our roles as the perfect couple. Bringing him there wasn't about hurting my husband. It was a desperate attempt to feel something, to feel alive in a space where I had started to feel like a ghost. I told myself I could keep it separate. That this was a temporary lifeline I could hold on to until I learned how to breathe on my own again, and then I would let go and fix my real life. I know how stupid that sounds now. For a year, I lived 2 lives. The numb, quiet one at home, and the one with Alex where I felt seen and heard. I was clinging to that connection with everything I had. Then one evening in September, it all came crashing down. He'd been quiet all day, a different kind of quiet. A cold, heavy silence. I was in the kitchen and he walked in and just stood there holding my phone. My heart dropped into my stomach. He didn't find it by accident. He had gone looking for it. He'd waited until I was in the shower, guessed my passcode, and read everything. He broke my trust to prove I had broken his. The confrontation wasn't a tearful, heartbroken mess. It was cold, calculated. His first words weren't, "How could you?" or "Why?" His first demand was, "You will cut off all contact with him. Now." It wasn't a plea from a man in pain. It was an order. He wanted to sever my only emotional lifeline and lock me back inside the glass case. I promised I would. I deleted Alex's number in front of him. I blocked him on everything I could think of. I promised it was over. And in that moment, I meant it. But the days that followed were worse than before. The ghost in my house was now a warden. He watched my every move. He'd casually ask to use my phone to look something up. He'd ask who I was texting. The silence was heavier, filled with suspicion. I felt like I was being suffocated all over again, but this time the walls were closing in. I was falling apart. He had taken away my only friend, the only person I felt I could talk to, and left me alone with my jailer. I just needed to know Alex was okay. I needed to explain. I told myself it wasn't about the affair anymore. It was about not being completely isolated. So I found him on Instagram. The messages were stupid, harmless. "Hey, are you okay? This is all a mess. I'm sorry." Nothing romantic, just connection. Just a whisper to the only person who I felt understood me. It's been about a month since he found out. We've been living like tense roommates, sleeping with a wall of pillows between us. Tonight we were watching TV. I got up to get a glass of water, leaving my phone on the coffee table. It was a stupid, careless mistake. When I came back into the living room, he was holding it. His back was to me, but I could see the rigid set of his shoulders. He was scrolling slowly. Then he stopped. He tilted his head, and I knew what he was looking at. He was reading my messages with Alex. I froze in the doorway, my heart pounding against my ribs. I couldn't breathe. He slowly turned around the screen of my phone, lighting up his face. He didn't look sad. He didn't even look angry. He just looked cold, victorious. He looked up at me, and his lips curled into a tiny, terrible smile. "I wasn't doing anything," I stammered the words, feeling thin and stupid in the silence of the room. "We were just talking." He didn't respond. He just slowly lowered the phone and held it out to me. The screen was still lit up with my open conversation. "It's funny," he said, his voice terrifyingly calm. "For a month I've been wondering if I was crazy. Wondering if I was the bad guy for checking your phone, for not trusting you. Thank you for clearing that up for me." That little smile was still on his face. It wasn't a happy smile. It was the smile of someone who just won a game. He hadn't caught his cheating wife. He had caught an escapee. This was his proof, his victory. He finally had the moral high ground, clean and simple. "It wasn't like that," I pleaded, my voice cracking. "He was my friend. You made me cut off my only friend, and I was so alone. I just wanted to see if he was okay." "Your friend," he let out a short, sharp laugh that had no humor in it. "The one you were screwing in our bed, that friend?" Every word was a perfectly aimed dart. He wasn't heartbroken. He was prosecuting me. He didn't want to understand why I was drowning. He just wanted to make sure I knew it was all my fault. I looked at the man I had spent my entire adult life with, and I didn't see a husband. I saw a stranger who had been waiting for me to fail. The ultimatum came next, just as I knew it would. But it wasn't about us anymore. "I'm done," he said, turning his back on me and walking towards the bedroom. "This is over. I'm calling a lawyer tomorrow." That was it. No yelling, no crying. Just a cold, clean execution. He wasn't trying to save us. He was cashing in his chips. The perfect victim narrative was now complete. He had given me a second chance, and I had thrown it away. Case closed. The days that followed were a blur of logistics. He moved into the guest room. We spoke only through clipped formal sentences about mail and bills. He filed for divorce exactly when he said he would. Our first meeting was with a mediator, a neutral woman in a gray pantsuit, who sat between us at a long polished table. The whole thing felt surreal. We were divvying up a life. Who gets the couch? Who gets the wedding china? We were dismantling the museum exhibit piece by piece. He was a different person in those meetings. Composed, reasonable, efficient. He never looked at me. He spoke to the mediator as if I wasn't even there. "We have agreed to sell the house and split the equity," he'd say, his voice flat. He was so good at playing the part. The wronged but dignified husband doing the right thing. Meanwhile, my world was burning down around me. The news traveled fast. His family, who had treated me like a daughter for over a decade, cut me off completely. Friends we'd had since college stopped returning my calls. They had heard his version, the simple, easy-to-digest story. She had a year-long affair. He found out he tried to forgive her, and she went right back to the other man. I was the monster. He was the saint. No one wanted to hear about the years of silence, about the emotional neglect, about the soul-crushing loneliness. No one wanted to hear that I was crying for help and the affair was the only way I knew how to scream. It's so much easier to have a clear hero and a clear villain. I made it easy for them to choose. Alex and I don't talk anymore. Once the divorce was filed, the reality of it all crashed down. What we had was a lifeline in a storm, not a foundation for a future. It was a symptom of my broken marriage, not a cure for it. He was a good person who got caught in my disaster, and it ended just like everything else. I'm completely on my own now. We sold the house last month. Walking through those empty rooms for the last time was strange. It didn't feel like I was losing a home. It felt like I was leaving a prison I had helped build. This was the stage where I had performed wifehood, where I had felt invisible, and where I had finally betrayed everything to feel alive. So here I am, 28 years old, living in a small apartment across town, trying to figure out who I am when I'm not one half of a couple. For the first time since I was 16, my identity isn't tied to his. It's terrifying. Most days I'm just sad. I mourn the boy I fell in love with and the man he never became for me. I mourn the future we were supposed to have. I carry the shame of what I did every single day. But some days in the quiet of my new apartment, I feel something else. It's a tiny spark of not happiness, but possibility. I can eat cereal for dinner and no one cares. I can watch whatever I want on TV. I can be messy. I can be selfish. I can just be times me times without worrying about how the exhibit looks from the outside. I know I broke our vows. I know I caused him a pain he never deserved, and I will live with that forever. I'm the villain of his story, and I have to accept that. But I'm not a monster. I was just a woman who was so desperate to be seen that I set my own life on fire just to feel the warmth.
Story 8.
I know what you think of me. You've probably heard his side. The good husband, the loving father betrayed by his sick wife. The monster who threw away 16 years for nothing. And you're not wrong. He is a good man. But you don't know what it's like to be a ghost in your own life. We were together for 16 years, married for 6. We were that couple everyone knew would make it. High school sweethearts who actually grew up together instead of apart. We built a life. We bought a house. We had 2 beautiful kids, a boy and then a girl. From the outside, it was perfect. And for a long time, on the inside it was too. He was my best friend. The only person I could be completely stupid with. Then our daughter was born and something inside me broke. It wasn't just the baby blues. It was a thick gray fog that rolled into my head and just stayed there. I'd look at my beautiful children, this life we'd built, and I would feel nothing. Just a deep, terrifying emptiness. Some days, the only thing I felt was a voice in my head telling me it would be better for everyone if I just wasn't here anymore. It got bad. Really bad. I told him about the thoughts, and he did what any good husband would do. He sprang into action. He found me a therapist. He made sure I took my medication every morning, watching me swallow the pills with a glass of water, like I was a child. He'd text me during the day, "How's your mood on a scale of 1 to 10? Our entire life became about managing my depression. I wasn't his wife anymore. I was his patient. I was a project he had to manage. Our conversations stopped being about us. They were progress reports. Did you use the breathing techniques the therapist showed you? Are you feeling any better today than yesterday?" He'd look at me with this deep, tired sadness in his eyes, and I could feel how heavy I was to him. One night during a fight, he said he felt like he was dragging me through all of this. He didn't mean it to be cruel. He meant it as a way to show how much he was doing for me. But all I heard was that I was a dead weight. A burden. He was so busy trying to fix me that he didn't see me at all. I was drowning and he was standing on the shore, shouting instructions on how to swim better. I felt completely and utterly alone. The real me, the person I was before, the fog was screaming inside, but no one could hear her. I was just the mother, the patient, roles, boxes. I was disappearing. Then one day, a message popped up on my phone. A name I hadn't seen in 15 years. A guy from my past. Someone who knew me when I was just a loud, messy teenager who thought she knew everything. He had no idea I was a wife, a mother, a broken person. When he messaged me, he just saw times me asterisk. Or at least the version of me I used to be. It started with just talking, catching up. He was married too, with a kid of his own. It was harmless, or so I told myself. But it was more than that. It was an escape. It was a place where I didn't have to be the sad wife my husband was trying to fix. It was a secret. And for the first time in years, it was something that was completely mine. My husband was managing my medication schedule, but he wasn't managing this. The talking turned into meeting for coffee. The coffee turned into something else. It happened so fast I barely registered it. One minute I was a wife and a mother, the next I was a woman having an affair in a cheap hotel on the edge of town. I know he's not a good guy. He's a cheater. He used me to escape his own life just like I was using him. This wasn't a love story. It was never about him. It was about the feeling. For an hour or two, I wasn't numb. The guilt, the fear, the thrill, it was terrible, but it was times something asterisk. I would go home and the gray fog would be waiting for me, but for a little while I had felt a flicker of anything at all. For over a year, I lived two lives. In one, I was the zombie, in the sweatpants, going to therapy, playing with the kids, and nodding when my husband asked if the new meds were helping. In the other, I was lying and sneaking around, feeding this destructive secret that was the only thing that made me feel real. Every lie I told my husband was like laying another brick in a wall between us. He thought he was losing me to my depression. He had no idea I was running towards something else, something just as dark, because at least the fall was a feeling. But the lies got heavier. The double life was exhausting. The person I was with, my affair partner, was just as fake as the smiling mom I was at home. I was just a collection of different masks, and I didn't know who I was underneath them anymore. I couldn't keep it up. The whole thing was a house of cards, and I knew I had to be the one to knock it down. Last week, we were cleaning up after putting the kids to bed. He was washing the dishes, and I was wiping down the counter. It was our normal, quiet, broken routine. I looked at his back. The way his shoulders were slumped with the weight of everything, with the weight of me. And I just couldn't do it anymore. I couldn't pretend to be the person he was trying so hard to save. I can't do this anymore, I said. My voice was quiet, but it felt like a gunshot in the silent kitchen. He turned around, his hands still wet. Do what, honey? What's wrong? Was today a bad day? No, I said, my heart pounding. I mean times this asterisk. Us. I'm not happy. I want a divorce. The confusion on his face was instant. Then it was replaced by a deep, wrenching hurt. It was the look of a man who thought he was fighting a war on one front, only to be stabbed in the back. He spent the next hour pleading, asking what was wrong, what he could do, what he could fix. He was trying to solve this new problem, this new broken part of his life. I just kept shaking my head a hollow shell. Finally, after I'd run out of non-answers, he stopped and looked at me, his eyes searching my face for a clue he'd missed. Is there someone else? The silence after his question was the loudest thing I'd ever heard. It was only a few seconds, but in my head I lived 1,000 different lives. The life where I lied, where I said no, where I blamed it all on the depression and begged him to help me fix myself. The life where he held me, and we cried and tried to put the pieces back together, even though we both knew they were shattered. But I was so tired of lying. The lies were what got me here. I looked at his face so full of desperate hope, and I couldn't do it. I couldn't give him one more lie to hold on to. Yes, I whispered. He just stared at me. He didn't scream. He didn't yell. He just deflated. It was like watching the air go out of a balloon. The man who had spent the last year holding everything up, holding me times up, just collapsed in on himself. He stumbled back and leaned against the counter, his head in his hands. The sound he made wasn't a sob, it was a dry, hollow gasp, like he'd been punched in the gut and couldn't get his breath back. That was when the fight started. Not a shouting match, but something worse. It was a cold, clinical interrogation. He was the fixer, and he needed all the data on what had broken. Who is he? How long? Where did you love him? Every question felt like a knife. I tried to explain that it wasn't about the other guy, that he was just a symptom, a distraction. He doesn't matter, I said. That was the wrong thing to say. To him, it sounded like I was protecting this other man. His face twisted into something I'd never seen before, pure, undiluted rage. He doesn't matter, he finally yelled, his voice cracking. He matters. He was sleeping with my wife for over a year while I was at home with our kids. While I was holding your hand through panic attacks and driving you to therapy appointments and telling everyone that you were just sick. You weren't sick. You were a liar. I flinched at every word. He was right. But he was also wrong. I was sick. I screamed back, tears finally streaming down my face. I am sick. This whole thing, it happened times because times I'm sick. Don't you see? I just wanted to feel something, anything. So you decided to feel another man, he shot back. The words hung in the air, ugly and true. There was nothing I could say to that. He looked at me, this woman he'd known since we were kids, and I could see the exact moment he stopped seeing me as his wife. I was just the monster who had ripped his life apart. The confession wasn't a release. It was just the final fatal blow. The horror of what I'd done settled over me cold and heavy. I had burned down my entire life, and now I had to live in the ashes. And we are. Living in the ashes. It's been a few weeks, and we are still in this house. This house that used to be a home and is now just a shared prison. We move around each other like ghosts. We don't speak unless it's about the kids. I'll get them from school. Did you pack his lunch? We text each other from opposite ends of the couch. It's polite. It's sterile. It's unbearable. He sleeps in the guest room. I hear him on the phone at night talking to his brother, to his friends. I hear snippets of their advice. You deserve better. She's toxic. Get the kids and get out. They're right. He does deserve better. What they don't understand, what Times doesn't understand, is that this was never about what he deserved. It was about me trying to escape the feeling that I deserved nothing at all. He is in planning mode. The fixer is fixing his escape route. He's met with a lawyer. He's looking at apartments online. He is taking action, building a new life from the rubble. I watch him, and I feel a strange mix of relief and terror. I am just here. I take care of the kids. I go to my therapy appointments. I take my medication. But now I'm not his patient anymore. I'm his problem. The problem he is methodically arranging to remove from his life. Sometimes I see glimpses of the man I loved for 16 years. When he's playing with our son on the floor, or reading our daughter a bedtime story. In those moments, the pain is so sharp it takes my breath away. He is such a good father. He was a good husband. And I killed what we had. I know that. But people think this was a choice between my husband and another man. It was never that. This was a choice between numbness and feeling. It was a choice between being a ghost and being a monster. I chose to be the monster. Because at least monsters are real. At least they leave a mark. He thinks I threw our family away for some cheap affair. He doesn't get that I thought our family was already gone, lost in the fog of my depression, long before another man ever entered the picture. The affair wasn't the disease. It was a symptom of how sick I already was. A desperate, destructive, unforgivable attempt to feel alive. I don't know what happens next. He'll leave. He'll take the kids at least for a while. He should. He's the stable one. I'll be left here in this house full of memories I've poisoned. Alone with myself. That's what I thought I wanted, wasn't it? To be separate from my roles as wife and mother? To just be times me asterisk. It's a joke, a cruel one. I destroyed everything to find myself only to realize there's not much left underneath it all. Just a hollowed-out woman who set her own world on fire and is now just waiting for the smoke to clear. Story 9. I'm sure my husband told you his version of the story. He's a good storyteller. Very clear, very logical. He probably painted a picture of a perfect marriage destroyed by his selfish, cheating wife. And from his point of view, I guess he's not wrong. But things are never that simple, are they? I'm not asking for you to forgive me. I just want you to understand. Our love story was the kind people write books about. We met in college. He was my first everything, and we got married right after graduation. For 10 years, we were that couple. The ones who held hands finished each other's sentences, the ones everyone pointed to as proof that true love existed. He calls our story beautiful, and it was. But it was the beauty of a photograph, frozen in time. We were stuck on the first few chapters, the happy beginning, and we just kept rereading them over and over. The passion didn't die in a big explosion. It just faded into a comfortable, quiet routine. Sex became another thing on the to-do list, like taking out the trash. Our house felt less like a home and more like a museum dedicated to the kids we used to be. He was a good husband. He worked hard, he was kind, he was stable. But when he looked at me, I knew he still saw the 20-year-old girl with the messy ponytail he'd met in the campus library. He didn't see the woman I was, or the woman I was terrified I'd never get the chance to become. I was almost 30, and the only man I had ever been with was him. My whole identity was his wife. Then I got a new job. It was like someone finally opened a window in a stuffy room. The people I worked with, my new friends, they had lived. They had messy breakups, crazy travel stories, and stupid mistakes they laughed about. He calls them toxic, but they were just a lie. All I had was our one perfect, boring story. I'd listen to them and feel this ache deep in my chest, a desperate fear that I was missing out on my own life. My new manager, Alex, was part of that. He didn't treat me like someone's wife. He saw me. He listened to my ideas in meetings. He laughed at my stupid jokes. He asked me about my goals. The attention was like a drug. It wasn't about him, not really. It was about feeling like an interesting, desirable person again, separate from my marriage. The idea for the open marriage was mine. I know. It sounds like the worst idea in history, and trust me, I get that. But at the time, it felt like the only solution. It wasn't some grand plan to go sleep with my boss. It was a desperate attempt to let some fresh air into our world before we both suffocated. I thought naively that if we both had the freedom to explore, we could have our own little adventures and then come back to each other with new stories, new energy. Thought it could make us stronger. I truly believed that. I was a complete and total fool. At first he said no. A hard no. But I pushed. I told him we were dying a slow death and this was the only way to shock our hearts back to life. He eventually, reluctantly agreed. The first couple of months were a blur. The attention from Alex turned into late-night texts, then drinks after work, and then more. It was a dizzying thrill. I felt reckless and free, and for the first time like the main character in my own story. I was so high on the validation on feeling times, scene times, that I pushed away the guilt. When my husband started going on a few dates, I told myself it was good. I told myself this was the plan, that we were both growing. But every time he'd leave the house dressed up for someone else, I'd see a flicker of hurt in his eyes. I chose to ignore it. I told myself it was just a necessary part of the process, a growing pain. Then he met her. It was different from the very beginning. His other dates were just that, dates. They were stories he'd tell me with a shrug when he got home. But her, he didn't talk about her much. He didn't have to. I saw it in the way his entire energy shifted. He started smiling at his phone, a real, genuine smile that reached his eyes. He'd take calls in the other room, and I'd hear him laughing. A light and easy sound I hadn't pulled out of him in years. He started looking happier, healthier. He looked alive. A cold, terrifying panic began to coil in my stomach. This wasn't the plan. The plan was for me to have a little experience and for him to... I don't know, I guess I never really thought that far ahead. I didn't think he'd find a whole new life. The thrill of my own affair evaporated overnight, replaced by a constant gnawing dread. My friends who had been my cheerleaders now just offered empty words. You wanted him to be happy, right? They'd say. But it was my divorced friend who finally said the thing that broke me. We were having coffee and I was complaining about how distant he'd become. She just looked at me, no judgment in her eyes, and said, "Well, it looks like his new girlfriend makes him really happy." That was it. The entire fantasy I had built, this idea of self-discovery and mutual growth, shattered into a million pieces. The adventure turned to ash in my mouth. I hadn't found myself. I had just outsourced my job. I had made a space in his life, and someone else had come in and filled it better than I had in years. That night, I watched him text her that same stupid, happy smile on his face. My heart was hammering against my ribs so hard I thought I was going to be sick. He wasn't mine anymore. He was hers, and it was all my fault. I walked over to him, my hands shaking. I had to end it. I had to get him back. "We have to stop this," I said, my voice barely a whisper. "This was a mistake. I want to close the marriage. Now." He just stared at me, his face blank. The happy, smiling man from 10 minutes ago was gone, replaced by a stranger. He didn't look angry, he just looked tired. He put his phone down and slowly shook his head. "You don't get to do that," he said, his voice quiet but hard as steel. "You opened this door. You can't just slam it shut because you don't like who walked through it for me." That was the beginning of the end. He was right, and I hated him for it. I begged, I cried, I reasoned. I told him my thing with Alex was just a stupid fling, a mistake. He told me that his thing with Times, her Times, wasn't. For the next few weeks, I lived in a state of high alert panic. My entire world narrowed down to one single mission: win him back. I became a walking, talking caricature of a perfect wife. The very next day, I walked into my office and quit. I didn't even give 2 weeks' notice. I just packed my things and left, emailing my resignation letter from the car. I blocked Alex's number and all my toxic friends without a word. I wanted to erase that entire chapter of my life, to prove to my husband that it meant nothing, that Times meant everything. I cooked his favorite meals, the ones I hadn't made in years. I suggested we watch the old movies we used to love. I tried to initiate sex, hoping I could somehow physically remind him that I was his wife, that I was the one who belonged in his bed. It was all useless. He was polite but distant. He was a ghost in our own home. He'd eat the dinners I made, thank me, and then retreat to the spare room to talk to her on the phone. Every laugh I heard through the door felt like a knife twisting in my gut. My grand gestures weren't seen as love. They were seen as manipulation. He thought I was just trying to get my toy back because someone else was playing with it. Maybe he was right. I don't know anymore. Our one and only counseling session was my last hope. I sat on that beige couch and I let everything out. I told the therapist and him about the suffocating quiet of our marriage, about my fear of disappearing, of having lived only one small life. I told them how the validation from Alex felt like a lifeline, and how I stupidly thought I could have that and still keep my perfect home. I didn't make excuses. I laid out all my ugly, pathetic, selfish reasons, hoping that if he understood times why, times I did it, he could find a way to forgive me. He just sat there listening patiently. When I was done, a mess of tears and snot, the therapist asked him how he felt. He looked at me, and for the first time in weeks, I saw real emotion in his eyes. It was pity. "I'm sorry you felt that way," he said, and it sounded so final. I wish you had just talked to me. On the drive home, I got a text from a number I didn't recognize. It was one of my old work friends, the one I'd ghosted. The text read, "Oh my God, did you hear about Alex? He just announced his engagement. His fiancée is gorgeous." I had to pull the car over because I couldn't breathe. A fiancé. The whole time, the man who I had used as a spark to burn down my entire life had a fiancée waiting for him at home. The deep connection, I thought we had the feeling of being seen. It was all a lie. I wasn't an adventure or a rediscovery of self. I was just a pleasant distraction for a guy who was cheating on the woman he was about to marry. The humiliation was so complete, so absolute, it felt like it was going to swallow me whole. I had traded a kingdom for a handful of sand. A week later, he told me he was moving out. He was gentle about it, but firm. He said he'd found an apartment with her. He came by on a Saturday with a few boxes. The silence in our home was deafening as he moved from room to room, collecting the pieces of his life that were separate from mine. I just followed him, a pathetic shadow, watching as our shared history was sorted and packed away. He stood in the living room, surrounded by our wedding photos on the walls, and he didn't even seem to notice them. My mind was racing, trying to find one last thing. One final piece of evidence to make him stay. I remembered the text from Alex after I quit. He'd sent a few asking what was wrong, why I was ignoring him. They were casual, almost bored. Proof of how little I meant. I grabbed my phone and shoved it in my husband's face. "Look," I said, my voice cracking. "See, it was nothing. He meant nothing. I chose you. I chose us." He glanced at the screen and then looked back at me, his expression unchanged. It didn't matter. It was all too late. He picked up the last box. This was it. The final moment. Panic clawed up my throat. "What does she give you that I can't?" I finally sobbed the question I'd been holding in for months, bursting out of me. It wasn't about sex. It was about everything. What was the magic piece of me that I had let die? What did she have that I had thrown away? I needed to know what I had lost. He stopped at the door, his back to me. For a second, I thought he was going to turn around and say something. Give me some kind of answer I could hold on to. But he never did. He just stood there for a moment in the silence. Then he opened the door and walked out, closing it softly behind him. The click of the lock echoed in the empty apartment. And I was alone. Completely and utterly alone in the museum we had built, surrounded by the ghosts of a happy life. A life I didn't realize was perfect until I had already destroyed it. A life I had murdered with my own two hands.
Story Teen.
My name is Amy, and I know what you think of me. My husband has probably painted a perfect picture of the monster in his bed, the liar who broke his trust. And I did. I lied. I broke everything. But before you cast your stone, I just need you to understand times why asterisk. I need you to know that this wasn't about destroying him. It was about trying to find myself. Living with my husband was like living in a perfectly curated museum. Everything had its place. His love was like that too, a quiet, predictable thing. We had date night every Friday. He'd kiss my forehead every morning before work. It was all so neat, so orderly. Years ago, he had a temper, a real fire in him that could be scary. But he went to therapy, worked on himself, and packed all that rage away into a box he buried deep inside. He replaced it with this unshakable, rational calm. Everyone said how amazing it was, how much he'd grown. But for me, it felt like he'd built a fortress around his heart and I was left on the outside. I couldn't get in. Next to his perfect controlled world, I just felt messy and small. I was a ghost, haunting the halls of my own life. Then there's Mimi, my best friend since we were kids. Mimi has always been the sun. I was just the planet that orbited her. She's the one who's effortlessly beautiful, the one who can charm anyone. I was just her smart, bookish friend. A few years ago, she started doing webcam shows. At first, it caused a massive explosion in her life. Her boyfriend, Buff Doug, completely lost it. They fought, they almost broke up, it was a whole drama. But then something shifted. He saw the confidence it gave her, the power she felt. And he didn't just accept it. He became her biggest fan. He started helping her, filming for her, cheering her on. She transformed. She had this spark, this dangerous energy, and I saw it and felt a pang of envy so sharp it physically hurt. I started falling down a rabbit hole online. I watched videos of women talking about empowerment, about taking control of their sexuality and not being ashamed of it. It felt like I was learning a secret language, one that Mimi already spoke fluently. I wasn't looking for a way out of my marriage. I love my husband, I really do. I just wanted to feel like someone he or anyone really would be terrified to lose. I wanted to feel like I mattered. One night, Mimi and I were having a few glasses of wine at her place. She was getting ready for a show and she looked at me. "You should join me," she said, half joking. "Just for fun. Put on a mask. No one will ever know." It was supposed to be a dare, a little thrill. My heart was pounding, but I said yes. For 1 hour behind a cheap masquerade mask, I wasn't the quiet wife or the boring friend. I was someone else. I was desired. The comments scrolling by were a rush I'd never felt before. It was intoxicating. And that's when Heat Times found me. His username popped up in my private messages a few days later. He'd been on the show that night and said he couldn't stop thinking about the mysterious girl in the mask. His attention was like a floodlight in my gray little life. My husband saw me as his reliable, stable Amy. This man saw me as exciting, bold a fantasy. He told me I was beautiful, that I had a fire in me. He saw the person I desperately wanted to be. Then he sent me money. The first time it was $100, with a message that just said, "For making my day." It wasn't about the money itself, not really. It was proof. It was a tangible piece of evidence that I was worthy of that kind of intense, focused attention. It felt like a validation my own marriage couldn't give me. I knew I was playing with fire. Mimi even warned me. "This is how it gets messy, Amy," she'd said. "It almost destroyed me and Doug. You have to tell him or you have to stop." But how could I possibly explain this? How could I tell the man with no cracks in his foundation that I had a gaping hole inside of me that needed to be filled with attention from a stranger on the internet? It sounded pathetic. It sounded insane. So I lied. Every lie was a desperate brick I laid to protect this fragile new feeling. When my husband asked why I was on my phone so much, I told him I was in a new group chat for a book club. When he asked about the late-night texts, I said it was just Mimi having another crisis. I started deleting messages, clearing my browser history, living a secret life right next to him. I told myself it was just a fantasy, an escape that I was in complete control of. I'd end it soon, I promised myself. I just wasn't ready to go back to being invisible yet. The lies got harder to manage. He started getting more suspicious. He wasn't accusing me, not yet, but the questions became more frequent. He'd pick up my phone and just look at it, a little frown on his face. The quiet in our house was no longer peaceful. It was heavy with things unsaid. I felt like I was holding my breath all the time, waiting for the floor to drop out. Last night I fell asleep on the couch. I'd been texting my online fan and must have drifted off. I woke up to my husband standing over me, his face unreadable in the dark. He wasn't holding my phone. He was holding his own with his banking app open. He just stood there for a second, the light from his screen illuminating his cold, calm expression. Then he spoke, his voice quiet. But it hit me like a physical blow. "Amy," he said, turning the phone so I could see the screen. It was a list of transactions. Small repeated deposits into our joint account. From a payment app I used. "Who is sending you money?" My heart stopped. For a split second, my brain tried to build another lie. A freelance writing gig I'd picked up, a refund from a store, but looking at his face so calm and so certain, I knew it was over. All the flimsy walls I'd built came crashing down at once. I couldn't speak. I just started crying, these ugly, choking sobs. The whole story tumbled out of me. It wasn't a confession. It was a vomit of shame and desperation. I told him about Mimi, about feeling invisible, about the stupid, intoxicating thrill of the webcam. I told him about the messages about the man who made me feel seen, and yes, about the money. I kept waiting for the explosion, for the old anger I knew he had buried inside him to finally erupt. I almost wanted it to. I wanted him to yell, to scream, to throw something. At least that would have been a reaction. At least that would have been passion. Instead, there was nothing. Just a cold, quiet disassembly of our life. He didn't ask me times why, times I did it. He didn't care about the gaping hole inside of me. He just listened, nodding slowly like a detective taking notes. The facts were all that mattered to him. "So you performed on a webcam," he stated, not asked. "And you started a relationship with a fan who paid you." "It wasn't a relationship," I sobbed. "It was just texting. It was a fantasy." He ignored me. "Go pack a bag, Amy." "What?" "No. Let's talk about this. We can go to therapy. We can fix this, I begged, grabbing for his hand, but he pulled it away. We are not a we right now, he said, his voice flat. I'm calling your parents. I'm going to tell them you need to stay with them for a while. He said it like he was informing me of a change in our utility provider, like he was returning defective merchandise. My husband, the man I loved, was handling the implosion of our marriage like it was an administrative task. The quiet was so much worse than yelling. It was the sound of him checking out of him, locking that fortress, and throwing away the key for good. The drive to my parents' house was the longest 20 minutes of my life. I cried the whole way, trying to explain myself, trying to get him to look at me. He just stared straight ahead at the road, his knuckles white on the steering wheel. When we got there, he walked me to the door and spoke to my mom in that same calm, controlled voice. Amy and I are having some problems. She needs to stay here for a little bit. He handed her my bag and left. He didn't even say goodbye to me. The first few days were a blur of shame. My parents didn't push for details, they just let me cry in my childhood bedroom. I was clinging to my phone, my only lifeline. I sent him a dozen texts a day, long, rambling apologies, pleas for him to talk to me, links to marriage counselors. They all just sat there, delivered but unread. Then he showed up. I heard the doorbell and my heart leaped, thinking he was here to talk, to finally let me in. But when I got to the living room, he was standing in the doorway with that same blank expression. I need your phone, he said. What? Why? It's on my plan. I'm shutting off the line. I'll make sure your photos are backed up for you. My sister Clara was there. She'd come over to bring me some things. She stood between us, her arms crossed. Just give it to him, Amy. No, I cried, backing away. It's my only way to talk to you, I said, looking at my husband. He just stared, his eyes empty. He took a step forward and I panicked. He was going to cut me off completely. As he reached for the phone, Clara grabbed me, holding my arms behind my back. I struggled against her, but she's stronger than she looks. Stop being so dramatic, she hissed in my ear. You did this to yourself. You always have to be the center of attention, don't you? You have no idea how good you had it. Her voice was dripping with a lifetime of resentment, a feeling like she was second best. My own sister, holding me down while my husband erased me. He took the phone from my hand without a word, turned and walked out the door. I collapsed and Clara just stood over me. He deserves better, she said, and left me sobbing on the floor. Now I'm trapped here. I'm using my mom's old iPad to send emails he doesn't open. A few days ago, Mimi called me crying. She told me Buff Doug had gone to see my husband. He went to explain his side and apologize for his part. I know exactly what that means. He went there to save his own relationship by making me the villain. He probably told him it was all my idea, that I dragged Mimi into it, that I was the one who went too far. And my husband, in his rational, fact-finding state, would have listened to him. He's listening to everyone but me. He's listening to Buff Doug, the pimp who filmed us. He's listening to my sister, who I now realize has always been jealous of me. He thinks he's handling this the right way. He's being logical. He's removing the emotion and dealing with the facts. He's creating distance to process. But he's wrong. This isn't rational. It's the cruelest punishment he could have possibly come up with. All I ever wanted was to feel seen by him, to feel like I was more than just a piece of his perfectly organized life. I was so terrified of being a ghost. And in his quest for calm, logical separation, he's done the one thing that confirms my deepest fear. He's not just leaving me. He's making me disappear.
Story 11.
I know what my ex-husband probably says about me. He's a therapist, so he has the perfect words for it. I'm sure he uses terms like narcissistic personality disorder or insecure attachment style. He's probably written a whole case study about me in his head. The unremorseful wife who cheated and threw away 7 years like it was nothing. I know I'm the villain in his story. But you're only hearing his side. You're only getting his diagnosis. You haven't heard from the patient. When I first met David, I thought I'd won the lottery. A therapist, a man who actually understood feelings. For the first few years, it was great. He was so attentive. He listened. Or at least I thought he was listening. Over time, I started to realize he wasn't listening to times me times the person. He was listening for patterns, for clues, for things to analyze. Every argument we had, no matter how small, turned into a session. I'd be upset that he forgot to take out the trash, and he'd sit me down and talk about my disproportionate emotional response and how I was projecting frustration from my job onto him. He never just said, "Sorry, I'll get it." It was always a deep dive into my psyche. Our friends would come over for dinner, and I'd watch him do it to them too. He'd casually drop therapy speak into conversations. He'd say he was making bids to connect. When he asked someone how they were, it wasn't just a friendly question. It was a technique. Nothing with him felt real. It all felt like an exercise. I started to feel like a bug pinned to a board. Our home wasn't a home. It was his lab, and I was the subject he got to study up close. I felt like I couldn't have a bad day without it being logged as evidence of some deeper issue. I couldn't be tired. I had to be exhibiting symptoms of burnout. I couldn't be annoyed. I had to be struggling with emotional regulation. Then came the fall. That's the day my life ended and my job began. We were cleaning the gutters, one of those stupid weekend chores, and he slipped. I heard the crack from the ground. It was horrible. He shattered his ankle in 3 places. The recovery was brutal, and I was the only one there to see him through it. For months, I was his entire world. Became his nurse, his cook, his driver, his memory. I helped him shower, wrapping his cast in plastic bags. I laid out his medication 3 times a day. I had to physically support his entire weight, grunting with the effort just to get him to the toilet and back. He says that's when our relationship began to change, and God, he's right about that. Asterisk, I times vanished. The person I was before the fall, a woman with a career, with friends, with hobbies, was gone. I was just a caregiver, an extension of his broken bone. My world shrank to the four walls of our house. I was so tired I could barely think straight. My back ached all the time from lifting him. I lost weight. I stopped talking to my friends because I had nothing to say except, "David had a rough night," or "We have another doctor's appointment tomorrow." And through it all, he was still the therapist. He'd be lying in bed in pain, and he'd try to have these deep analytical talks. He'd say things like, "I can see the caregiver fatigue is affecting your emotional availability." He wasn't seeing his wife, who was exhausted and breaking. He was seeing a textbook case. He would call these his bids to connect, but they felt like more work. He needed me to manage his physical recovery times, and times his emotional processing. I had nothing left to give. I was an empty well, and he was still standing over it with a bucket, asking for more. The affair wasn't some grand, passionate romance. It wasn't planned. It was a gasp for air when I was drowning. It started at a coffee shop. A guy named Mark worked there, and he just started being nice to me. He'd see me come in every morning looking like a zombie, and he'd have my order ready. Then he started asking, "Rough morning," and one day I just broke down. I told him a little bit about what was going on. He didn't offer advice or try to analyze me. He just listened. He said, "That sounds incredibly hard." "I'm sorry." That was it. That's all it took. Someone seeing my pain without trying to fix it or label it. We started talking more. He'd ask about my day, about my job, the one I was barely holding on to. He asked what music I liked. He told me a stupid joke, and I actually laughed a real laugh. For the first time in months. With him, I wasn't David's caregiver. I wasn't a case study. I was just me. A woman who liked bad coffee and dumb jokes. It turned into lunches. Then dinner once a week when I could get my sister to sit with David for a few hours. For 8 months, that was my secret. That was the one part of my life that felt like it belonged to me. It was a place where I could just breathe, where no one was watching me, waiting for me to crack so they could diagnose the pieces. At home, I built a fortress inside myself. I had to. David was getting better, starting to walk with a cane, but the dynamic was set. He saw my quietness as me being distant or cold. He didn't understand it was self-preservation. If I let even a tiny crack show, he would have pried it open with 100 questions about my feelings and my motivations. I couldn't let him in. He thought I was playing by a different set of rules. He had no idea he'd rewritten the whole game book years ago, turning our marriage into a clinical trial. The holidays were the worst. Stiff, quiet, and full of unspoken things. We went through the motions of Christmas opening gifts with forced smiles. By the time New Year's Eve rolled around, I felt like I was going to explode. We just sat on the couch and watched the ball drop in silence. January 2nd, the day it all came down. I was in the kitchen making coffee, trying to get back into some kind of normal routine. I'd left my phone on the charger in the living room. I remember feeling a sense of dread all morning, like the air was too thick to breathe. I walked into the living room to grab it, and he was just standing there, in the middle of the room. He wasn't looking at me. He was looking down at my phone open in his hand. He was completely still. There was no screaming, no crying. Just a chilling quiet. He looked up at me and his face was blank. It was the face he used with his most difficult patients. Calm, detached processing data. He held up the phone and I could see the screen was open to my texts with Mark. And all he said in a voice as flat and final as a closing file was, "Explain this." I didn't know what to say. For years, every word out of my mouth had been twisted and analyzed. And now he was holding the evidence that would prove whatever theory he'd already decided on. My mind raced. Should I cry, apologize, yell? It didn't matter. Any reaction would be noted down on his mental clipboard. Tears would be manipulation. Anger would be deflection. Silence would be a confession of guilt without remorse. "There's nothing to explain, David," I said, my voice barely a whisper. "You see what's there." He finally looked at me, really looked at me, but it wasn't my husband's gaze. It was the therapist. The eyes that could stare right through a person without seeing them at all. For 8 months, he asked, his tone level inquisitive. Like he was asking a patient to elaborate on a feeling. This has been going on for 8 months. It wasn't a question. It was a statement of fact he was adding to my file. I just nodded. I felt my chest tighten. I wanted to scream at him, to tell him times why, asterisk. To tell him about the loneliness, the exhaustion, about feeling completely invisible while being constantly watched. I wanted to tell him that Mark just saw times me, asterisk. But what was the point? He wouldn't hear it as a reason. He'd hear it as a justification, a symptom of a deeper pathology. So while I was learning to walk again, he continued, his voice still unnervingly calm. While I was trying to reconnect with you, you were with him. Trying to reconnect, I finally snapped, a bit of real feeling breaking through. You mean trying to analyze me, David? Every conversation we had was a session. You never once just asked how I was doing, without following it up with some observation about my emotional state. I was drowning and you were taking notes on how I thrashed. He processed that. I saw his head tilt slightly. So this was a reaction to perceived emotional neglect, he concluded. He wasn't even talking to me anymore. He was narrating his own diagnosis. A maladaptive coping mechanism. That's when I knew it was over. Truly over. There was no us to fight for. There was just him, the therapist, and me, the broken subject he could no longer fix. I didn't cry. I didn't beg. What could I show? He says. I showed no remorse. He's wrong. I was filled with a million feelings, shame, sadness for the man I used to love, relief that it was finally out, but I couldn't show him any of it. It wouldn't have been received as genuine emotion. It would have been documented as a performance. So I just stood there empty. I was already judged. The week that followed was the quietest of my life. We lived in the same house like ghosts. He slept in the guest room. We didn't speak. He just observed me. I would be washing dishes and feel his eyes on my back. I felt like a lab rat after the experiment had failed, just waiting to be disposed of. There was no fight, no slamming doors, no desperate late-night talks. He didn't fight for us. He was a professional who had encountered a problem he couldn't solve, so he was simply moving on. It was a clean, logical amputation. Exactly 1 week after he found the text, I came home from work and he was sitting at the dining room table with a folder in front of him. "I filed for divorce this morning," he said as calmly as if he were telling me we were out of milk. "These are your copies. I think it's best if one of us finds another place to stay as soon as possible." And that was it. He closed the folder and pushed it across the table. He had closed the case. I moved out 2 days later. The months since have been a blur of lawyers and dividing up our life. Our life together fit into a few dozen cardboard boxes. I heard through a mutual friend that his father passed away recently. I felt a pang of sadness for him, for the man I married 7 years ago. But then I heard what he was telling people. He was telling them that his father had been a narcissist, a cheat, and that he finally understood he was drawn to the same personality type. He was drawing a parallel between me and a man I'd never even met. Of course he was. That's the only way he can make this make sense. It's so much easier for him to slap a label on me, file me away under character flaw, than to look at the wreckage and admit he was holding a hammer too. It's easier to see me as a fundamentally broken person than to accept that his constant analysis, his clinical distance, and his emotional demands during his recovery left no room for me to exist. He thinks I treated our marriage as disposable. He'll never understand that I felt like I'd been disposed of long before I ever met Mark. I was just a ghost in his house, a name in his case file. The affair was just the footnote he needed to finally write, "The end."